Hi everyone, Major Mark Beretta here for the special edition of CoveTalk. Thanks for joining us. Tonight is a very special one. We're talking to Captain Hugo Toovey, who's had a remarkable run-in with cancer on 2 occasions. And his story of resilience and courage and getting through that is something pretty special. Just a couple of reminders before we start. Remember the Cove writing competition is underway at the moment. If you've got a great idea you want to put down on paper, do it now and get it into the Cove competition. And also the Cove app is always there for you. Make sure you take advantage of it and use it. But Captain Hugo Toovey's story, as I said, is of resilience. He's been struck down by cancer, 2 different cancers on 2 different occasions. And the way he's gotten through that and the support he's had is quite incredible. Now, remember that here in Australia, 1 in 2 Australian men, 1 in 3 Australian women will experience cancer at some form in their lifetime. So it's great to have Hugo here with us to take us through his story, how he dealt with it, and also what it's meant to him. Hugo, thanks for coming along tonight. Thanks for the chat. Just to get us up to speed with where you are at the moment, just explain your role in Army at the moment.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for joining me on this talk. And look, I'm very fortunate that my role in Army, or at the moment anyway, is heavily involved in the health and welfare space. So I think it's I'm lucky that what I've gone through and the charity work I do as well on the side to kind of have that passion in uniform too. It's great because I feel like I put the uniform on, and the work I do at Headquarters 4Com and the wider Army is heavily involved in all things health and welfare.
Which is great. All right, let's go back and start this story. So you're 21 years of age, you're at RMC, you're bulletproof, life is great, you're in your dream role, everything's just, the future is opening up for you, it's beautiful. And things change pretty quickly. What happened?
Yeah, that's it. So it was 6 months left before I graduated RMC. I went through ADFA, so at that stage it's like 3.5 years of training. The finish line's in sight. And I had this bit of a lump on my right testicle. It didn't have any pain. It felt relatively normal. Anyway, that little lump on my testicle I probably put off for about 6 months because like a lot of young blokes, you kind of think that, she'll be right. I'd go on Google and search lump on testicle, but I'd find like the most least severe thing I could find and be like, that's what it is. It's a benign cyst. But it wasn't until my old man prompted me. It was actually his birthday. I remember calling him up and I said, look, on an unrelated side note, Dad, I've got this weird lump on my testicle. What do you reckon? He said, mate, why don't you go to the doctor? I'm like, well, that's a good idea,
Groundbreaking.
Groundbreaking, right? And especially because where I was at Longtown Lines at RMC, the RAP, the doctor was 30 metres from my room, but I put this off for 6 months because I thought, I didn't want the doctor having a look at my balls or anything like that. So like a lot of young blokes, I was pretty naive about the whole thing. Anyway, old man prompted me, went to the doctor, had a feel around, didn't think much of it, sent me off for an ultrasound. And then within, 12 hours, I got the call from the doctor to go back. And he said, mate, you've actually got testicular cancer. But unfortunately it's also spread because, I put off that little pea-sized lump.
Yep. When you were putting it off, was there a fear in your mind? Was that part of why you waited so long?
Yeah, look, I think so. Like, I think that fear of the unknown is often the most difficult part. It's like anything. You kind of just, you hope for the best. And sometimes that whole just pushing it to the side, hoping it disappears on its own, that was definitely at the forefront. So that, I constantly went through my mind about, it's nothing. And I never really thought that, what if it's cancer or what if it's something more serious?
So what's that moment like when the doctor comes back to you, sits you down and says, hey, Hugo, it's testicular cancer?
Look, to be honest with you, I was 21 and I was more worried about, is this going to impact me graduating, believe it or not, because I didn't actually know much about cancer. I didn't have any family history of cancer. And all I was keen on is, hang on, can I still graduate? And believe it or not, because the cancer had already spread and I was already having to have chemotherapy and the follow-on treatment, I could actually put a pause to that for 3 or 4 months, pretend nothing was going on, even though I had cancer all through my body, finish RMC, do my last field exercise, told none of my mates or anything like that. I was very, very hidden about the whole thing. Graduated at Canberra at RMC, family flew over from interstate, and then 6 days later I was hooked up and having chemo. And my twin brother shaved my head and away I went. So it was, a bit of that strange feeling, to be honest, especially being only 21, 22.
Tell us about the treatment. What happens from the moment of that diagnosis? What's the first stop after that?
So I had the removal of the testicle first and foremost.
Did that happen almost straight away?
Yeah, pretty much within 24 hours.
Right.
Remove the testicle, which while we're talking about testicles, Mark, I like talking about testicles. And it was a weird moment, right? I have to tell this story because I think it's important. Just been told I had testicular cancer, just been told it spread, pretty vulnerable moment. And I was in the office with my urologist. And he said, right, Hugo, surgery's booked in for tomorrow. Importantly, I need to ask you a question. I said, no worries. He said, do you want a fake testicle? And I remember saying, yeah, sounds pretty good. I was single at the time, thought, why not? And he got this little briefcase looking thing and kind of flipped it open. Kid you not, I wish I could make this up. And there were different sort of size, shapes and textures of fake testicles. And I remember literally feeling through these fake testicles and he said, now what size do you want? I'm like, I don't know, match it up with my other one. Like, isn't that obvious? And he said, well, it's not uncommon for some blokes to want a bigger fake nut. And I do have a bit of a drunken party trick, which I won't do here. But now I kind of get why a fake nut could have been more fun. But anyway, it's called real or fake, but we don't have to.
we can guess.
Well, you can guess what goes on there. All about raising awareness, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Getting blokes to check their nuts in the shower. It's what it's all about. But look, I do find humour's actually helped me a little bit through, as you're about to talk about it, a lot more than just this particular journey. But over the last 9 years, humour actually has helped me get through some difficult times. But there I was, got my fake nut. And away I went and then, put it on pause for a few months, graduated and then commenced chemotherapy, which was the type that did lose all my hair and got pretty crook and, curled up against the toilet. So that stuff you see in the movies. Chemo can be different for different cancers, but for me, that's how it was. And then unfortunately the chemo didn't quite do its job. So I had to have a really big abdominal operation to remove all my lymph nodes. I was pretty crook ICU for a while and hospital for quite a while. So, that was quite a big 6 to 12 month journey from graduating as a young lieutenant, leading up to sort of, early 2022, 23, until I could really then embark on a military career and try and look, even when I was bald-headed and crook, I'd still go in, I was on a compassionate post in Adelaide, I'd still go to work at Headquarters 9 Brigade. I was the LO to the commander, I'd still try and do stuff. There's only so much I could do. But I didn't actually get to full-time work for probably a good 12 months after all those treatments and surgeries and stuff like that.
Physically, how tough is it on the body?
Yeah, look, it is. Like, it's very tough. And I was just having a chat offline about, I think the one positive is that I was pretty young and fit. So I think that, yes, it was tough, but I felt like I could respond pretty quickly. But yeah, look, it's not a great drug, right? Like a lot of the cancer treatments are. It kills all your healthy cells too. So you're very sick and you're very crook. I'm still on some active treatment at the moment, which lowers my immune system and stuff like that. So it's just stuff you always have to be mindful of. But a lot of people are on these medications for a long time, and it can really impact them long term as well.
So this treatment goes on for a period of 4 or 5 years? Yeah.
So the chemo went for just under 6 months, then the surgeries, but then there was the follow-on treatment I had with that. And then, like we're probably going to talk about soon, that it wasn't just the testicular cancer, and then it was the follow-on treatment that I had to have as a result of other health events.
Okay, so let's talk about that. 5 years down the track, you get the all clear, testicular cancer gone, well done, celebrate. Bang, you get whacked again.
Yeah, and that was a tough one because I was 26. I just got promoted to captain. Remember the feeling well. First time for a long time. I was medically upgraded. I got posted to Brisbane to 9 FSB. I was even lined up for a deployment. All exciting as a young captain, right? It's what you kind of want to do. And then I got the 5-year all clear scan, and that was kind of the, for those who have been impacted by cancer, and you would know very well with the work you do, that 5-year marks off on that big milestone. And I remember cheering with my partner, having a champagne, it was a big achievement to be all clear, you're in complete remission. But that only lasted for about 2 months. And 2 months later, my bowels started playing up, and I thought, this isn't right. Young 21-year-old Hugo who put off that little lump for 6 months, at least I was a bit more proactive with my health. And it kind of went on for a couple of weeks. I remember saying to Amber, my partner, no, I got to go off to a doctor. Something's not right here. Inconsistent bowel movements, stomach pain. Went to the doctor, had a pretty routine colonoscopy. which I don't know if you're at that age yet, Mark. Of,
I am.
Colonoscopy. So
I have been for a while.
Okay. Pretty normal procedure, right? Let camera
Really?
up the bum, have a look what's going on. Like, it's not too invasive,
Yeah.
And I didn't think much of it. I woke up, I was eating my turkey sandwich, happy days. And then it wasn't until the doctor came out and said, mate, I found a few really nasty polyps. They're probably nothing, but for your age, it's a bit strange if you had family history of bowel cancer. I thought, no. And I've heard that word. I was like, hang on, what? Anyway, I went to work the next day, dressed in my uniform, typing away at my desk. I remember getting a call from the receptionist. And she said, hey, Hugo, Terry, the results came back. Terry needs to see you. And I thought, all right, I'm due to see him in 2 weeks. And she's like, no, he needs to see you this afternoon.
Wow.
And then I'm like, well, that's not good. That sinking feeling in your stomach. And then went to the doctor's appointment and I knew something wasn't probably quite right. Walked in and he had this look on his face and he just turned his computer screen around and said, mate, sorry to say, but you've actually got bowel cancer. And that was very difficult to take on because it was 2 months after I'd just been cleared of testicular cancer. This was a completely new cancer, new primary cancer, had nothing to do with testicular cancer. It's just the timing of it was really bad luck. And bowel cancer is a killer, it's the second biggest cancer killer. And at 26 years of age, you're being told you had bowel cancer, and that was tough. And I sometimes still get emotional about it, to be honest. More so because I can still recall the moments of telling family, and you touched on at the start, something like cancer or mental illness or these health events impacts so many people. I remember calling my old man up, and he didn't even know I was having a colonoscopy. And I just said, yeah, Dad, I've got some bad news. And I could hear him get emotional. And he's not an emotional guy. And then all of a sudden he's, I can hear my old man crying because his son's just told him I've got another bout of cancer. And you feel like you put your family through all this pain. Like, they're going through this with you. And it's really difficult. But you don't have a choice. Like, you don't have a choice. You just have to just be like, all right, what next? And then I had to just go on the follow-on surgeries and treatments. And I've just been taking it ever since until very recently I found myself in hospital again having another emergency bowel surgery. So it's just been ongoing. But that was difficult, that whole initial stage of discovering that.
It's often one of the understated things, the toll that it takes on families and the drain of resource and emotion and energy on families. But the flip side of that is the support that you get from the family. And also your work colleagues too. I mean, how much support have you had from family and who's been your rock? And tell us about your support from Army as well.
Yeah, you're spot on. And like for me, support from my fiance. I'm getting married in November, so
congratulations.
Soon to be wife. She's we've been together for 8 or 9 years, and she's been with me the whole time. And she's a nurse, so she's kind of got that caring trait to her. But she's just by my side in hospitals and. My boss here at work, she saw me in hospital and probably saw my, fiance sitting by my bed. She's done that for years. So she's been a massive support. And I, the whole cliche, I couldn't have done it without her. It's honestly true because she just takes off that level of stress that you're going through. And then work, like you said, I'm often in the Army, we hear a lot of the not so good stories of people who have gone through, transitions or health events. We don't often hear the good stories or the success stories of someone who's actually, like myself, been looked after, but also not just from a medical point of view, but my colleagues and my people I work with, and some of my best mates today are my fellow captains who I went through ADFA with or RMC with, and we've just been mates ever since. But then also having a job that you have that purpose, when you go through what I've gone through, to be able to put that uniform on, it's understated how much that does to your mental state, to feel like you're actually contributing and you can still offer, the Army a lot and the job I'm doing. So I'm so fortunate that I've, my partner, my family, and then the Army, which is kind of that work family, has just made it that little bit easier.
Yep. Hugo, tell us about the road ahead treatment-wise. Where are you?
Yeah, so look, I'm up until a few months ago, I was doing really well. I was the best I'd been for a long time, which is fantastic. I've since been diagnosed with another sort of bowel disease. I've only got a small bowel left. They had to, due to my bowel cancer, they had to remove my my colon and my rectum. So I had an external bag for about a year, and then remarkably they reversed the bag, and I've got an internal J pouch, they call it. They stretch down my small bowel and create like a J shape, and then over time that kind of acts as your large bowel and rectum. So there was about 6 months I had to kind of learn how to go to the bathroom again like a kid. So that was challenging. I still go to the bathroom, 10, 12 times a day, but that's just my new normal. Like I don't know any different now. It's kind of, I just adapt, and that's just me. And fortunately, it was getting to a stage where it was really good, really manageable. I was doing really well. And then I ended up back in hospital because I had a bowel obstruction, because I've had about 8 or so abdominal surgeries. I've got so much scar tissue. And part of my small bowel had twisted on itself, caused this bowel obstruction. Then it caused this dead bowel, and I had to remove 20 centimeters of my small bowel and stitch it back up. And I was pretty crook again. I'm only just sort of back end of recovering from that, which has been another bit of a little chapter. But I'm sort of back at work and feeling a lot better. I'm still on some treatment, which is sort of like a self-administered injection, which I've got another one next week. But all in all, that's being said, like it sounds like a lot. I'm actually doing pretty well. Most importantly, my mental health is actually in a really good place at the moment. But I've had to really work on that over the years, and that's something that often doesn't get talked about enough. We often focus on all the physical stuff, and the mental health stuff gets pushed to the side. But I'm actually in a pretty good place, all things considered.
Yeah, let's talk more about that because it's so important. And I can tell that you've been worried about the people around you, and and trying to make it easy on them. So how tough has it been? Where do you turn for help when you find that you really need help? And have you been able to do that?
Yeah, look, I have. I think I've got so much better of it over the years in doing stuff like this. Being open and vulnerable and actually talking about my feelings. I never used to do that, but I realised it's kind of therapeutic for me in a way and healing for me. But also by kind of letting other people know what you're going through, they can kind of have a bit more of an insight and help you. But I find that just having those people in your life that you can just always rely on. So if you, like my partner now, if I'm having a really bad day, I'll tell her that I'm having a really bad day. And then it's just trialing new different things. And for me, it sounds silly. We've probably all heard of it, but I've got a gratitude journal next to my bed, and every night without fail, it's got 3 little things that you're grateful for in that day. And I was even doing that when I was in hospital. So if you've had a really bad day, it's just a matter of finding the smallest little things. Like, you know what, that walk to work, or that morning coffee I had was pretty good, or cuddling my dog on the couch, watching a movie was pretty good, or whatever it might be. But just actually realizing there's actually been a bit of good in today, even though I feel like I haven't had a good day. So it's just working on stuff like that, finding what works for you is the key, and just having that support network. Not necessarily, it doesn't have, I see a psychologist, but it doesn't have to be a psychologist or a clinician. It can be a close friend or a colleague or a family member that you can really rely on. And it could be 2 a.m, and you can feel like you can pick your phone up, call your good mate and say, I'm having a shitty day, mate. Can we have a chat? That's the important stuff. It's just kind of having those conversations, normalizing those conversations, and actually talking about it goes a long way.
Having been through the process now, what do you want people to know about testicular cancer and bowel cancer? What are the 2 things that we all need to know that we don't?
Look, the biggest thing for testicular cancer, and the easiest thing, and for all the blokes even watching this, it's something like, especially the younger blokes, it is a younger man's cancer. It's in the shower tonight when you're thinking of us, which is a little bit weird and sexual, but that's okay.
Lovely, really
lovely.
Nice.
It is. It's for the right reasons. In the shower tonight, when you're kind of thinking, because it's the best way to check it, actually have a check of your testicles. And it's something, that whole self-check, self-awareness piece. And same thing for women and for all aspects of your body. It's like when you have, freckles or lumps and bumps, it's just being aware of your body is the simple key. You know your body better than anyone. So if there's a couple changes and you think that's not quite right, whether it's a lump on a testicle or it's a, abnormal little freckle that you think I should probably have a skin check, that's the key. And then for something like bowel cancer, I often say the 2-week rule, and that's not something that I necessarily invented. That was through medical advice. They say that if you've got sort of inconsistencies that are not your normal, right, for over 2 weeks, so this isn't not just a I've eaten something that's kind of, your guts are playing up. So over 2 weeks and things are playing up, it's usually a good sign to go off to your doctor. So they're kind of the key ones. It's that self-checks, which everyone can do by themselves. And then if something's not quite right for that sort of over a couple week period, just go see your doctor. What's the worst that can happen is just having that check and going to see your doctor.
Cancer and these two cancers are just so prevalent in society. As I said, 1 in 2 Australian men, 1 in 3 Australian women. What do you say to someone who might get the diagnosis tomorrow?
Yeah, look, nothing can really prepare you for that. And I think people will handle it differently. And that's probably a key, is that there's no right or wrong. But, all I can say is that for me anyway, having that support around you, and I know some people have, more family support than others, but having some level of support around you, because it's a bloody hard thing to go through by yourself. And even if it's a friend, a colleague, a family member, it's just having them along with you, because it will just make it that, that little bit easier.
Yep. What was the darkest day? What was the hardest part?
Well, the hardest part, probably outside of telling my old man and like telling my family. And I think there's actually a photo which I often reflect on, this photo, which I don't know if it's going to come up for those watching, but it's this. It's a time where I lost about 22 kilos in hospital. I was really crook. I had the bag, and I was so unhappy though. And I've got this photo actually, and it's I often reflect on that photo. And when I give presentations, I put the photo up, and it can be a bit confronting, but for me, it's kind of a way of showing how far I've come. And if I'm having a really bad day, or what I've recently gone through, and I'm thinking, Jesus, I don't know if I can go this again. I look at that moment, and that moment wasn't great. Like, it's, you look at yourself, and you just physically, mentally, you're just not in a good place. And I feel really sorry for like that person who I was, because I just know how much pain I was in. And it's, well, like I said, I often reflect as kind of comparing myself to myself, in the sense of I've come a long way. But that was, probably my darkest days.
So how did you pick yourself back up?
Yeah, look, it's tough. It is tough. And all those behind the scenes things that people probably don't see, they often see me as being that positive, optimistic guy, which, I'm generally pretty positive, but people really don't see the behind the scenes that, say, my partner sees. And that's why she's such a beautiful person, because she's probably put up with a lot of, me being at my absolute worst. So to be honest with you, she's probably the reason that I've kind of would give me that hope to pick myself up. Because when you've had times that, you don't think you'll make it through the end of the week or the month or whatever, having my partner there with that, whether it's bringing me frozen watermelon in the hospitals because it's the only thing I can eat, or that positive reinforcement, or just that, sense of, optimism and positive reinforcement really goes a long way. So she's been my rock for sure.
Has it changed your outlook on life, the way you go about life?
Yeah, look, it definitely has. Like, I think, like I said before, I'm actually in a pretty good place at the moment. And when you go through these big health events, I'm sure there's people here today or people watching this who have gone through, massive events or adversity in their life. And it definitely does change your perspective. And I often like a little tagline I like is the fact that life's bloody precious. And, once it's all said and done, we all have stressful days. We all have stuff going in life. But the core of it is that life's precious. And I think that it does change my perspective on things. And I realized that, like, you were just reading out some stats before. Like, I actually am one of the lucky ones, because unfortunately there are so many people that aren't as lucky as I am. They're not here today sharing their story. So that's kind of my perspective on looking at things. And I try and just, appreciate that little glass of wine that little bit more, or, appreciate being around friends and appreciate putting that uniform on. And they're the little things that I just like to reflect on.
Yeah. You mentioned they're putting the uniform on, and you mentioned earlier the amount of support that you'd got from your workmates and your colleagues. But how important has that support from Army and from your workmates and from the organisation been to you?
Oh, it's massive. It's huge. It's, having that uniform, it's, there is that sense of pride. And, I think that's why largely a lot of people have those difficulties when they do transition out of the Army and they have got a lot going on in their lives, is they probably underestimate how much that uniform did to them. That kind of that safety blanket, that that family. Like you've got these colleagues and this special community, and we were chatting before about it, how like when you were saying when you put your uniform on, it's quite that special community that you're part of. For me, it's massive, and I'm so proud that I'm still serving, and I'd like to think I can still contribute to the army in some way, shape, or form, because it's so important to have that purpose. Like if you don't have purpose, things can be pretty difficult.
Yeah. So on that, let's talk about what lies ahead. Married in November.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Congratulations. That's coming up. What are your hopes and dreams? What happens from here? Where are you looking to?
Look, it's I don't have necessarily long-term goals as far as naturally I can be a bit pessimistic on the health front of it can be deflating in a way of, I don't want to plan too far ahead because it's like, for example, I have to change my honeymoon because I'm not allowed to go overseas because this recent health event can happen again. But that being said, I still like to look at things like the wedding coming up. And then also, like I was saying to my partner last night, we both would love to move back to Adelaide. We're both from Adelaide. Adelaide Hills, dogs running around, like that, Adelaide Hills property wineries nearby, like that sort of stuff that I visualise, that's what makes me really happy. And then on a work front, I'm off to DFR next year. So I'm really excited to in Sydney to move into the world of recruitment. And it's something a bit different to welfare, but it's still around people, and it's something I can contribute to as well. And like I said, I'm a good news story of how the Army supported me. I'm a massive advocate for the Army. So I'm also looking forward to that. And what happens after that, I'm not too sure, but there's definitely some things to look forward to.
Yeah. Tell us, just explain for us how this whole process you've been through has made you better in your role as a welfare officer. I mean, obviously you have a whole new perspective now.
Absolutely. It's that, look, I'm a massive one for that lived experience of someone going through something that someone else can relate to. And I, do share my story, quite a bit, and I share it in uniform and out of uniform. And the amount of conversations I've had with soldiers from all demographics, whether it's a warrant officer who's been in for 30 years or a young private who's come up to me after a presentation or after I've shared my story, and some of them might have had a few tears and something they're going through, and they start opening up about an experience they've had. It's quite a rewarding, strange feeling when you can almost use what I've gone through in these really shitty times to help someone else, but then encourage others when they're ready to do so to go, hey, like your story might also be able to help someone else. And having that relatability of seeing, hang on, this guy's a young bloke who's gone through all this. He's not too dissimilar for me. How I'm feeling at the moment with my mental health and all that type of stuff. I'm not alone. I'm not going through this by myself. So it's kind of just having those conversations, breaking that stigma down a little bit. So that's kind of what I'm really kind of embracing, enjoying doing at the moment.
I think you hit on something important earlier when you talked about vulnerability. That honesty and vulnerability is just so important. Hugo, we're out of time. I just want to say thank you very much. Thanks for your honesty and for being so vulnerable in telling your story and for sharing your story, because it will make a big difference to a lot of people. So thank you. Good luck. All the best for the wedding, and good luck for your career ahead. We look forward to following.
Thanks, man.
Thanks, Hugo.
Appreciate it.
Just a couple of quick reminders from the Cove too. Don't forget to stay in touch, keep with the app, and the writing competition is underway. You might have been inspired by something you heard tonight. But thanks very much for joining us, everyone. We'll have more Cove chats coming up shortly. I'm Major Mark Beretta. Have a great night. See you soon. Thanks very much.